Hey, I'm Kai. In this video I will show you how to work with my KayKit characters and character animations. We'll cover importing and setup, extracting animations and creating animation libraries. We'll attach weapons and accessories to the character. We'll even do some basic character customization, like swapping body parts between characters. I'll show you how to set up alternative textures, and I have some tips and tricks for working with materials. Later on in the video, we'll make an animation state machine. I'll even show you how to set up third-party animations like Mixamo. But to clarify, I am not a programmer, and I will not be showing you how to program your character controller or any other coding. I'm assuming that you have basic familiarity with the Godot game engine. To follow along with this tutorial, you will need one or more KayKit characters and some animations. Links for both are in the description. Alright, let's get started. Using KayKit characters and their animations in Godot. Before we get started, let's do some organizing first. Let's set up a nice folder structure. We're going to need a folder that houses all of our assets, and within that we're going to make some subfolders. One for our characters, one for all of our textures. Our materials are going to need a folder, as well as our finished scenes. Now that we've got that done, we can start importing a character into Godot. When you download one of my KayKit character packs, you'll be greeted with a similar folder structure. You'll find a folder for animations, a folder for assets, a folder for characters, and a folder filled with textures. For Godot, it's recommended to use the GLTF file format. So that's what we'll be using. For this tutorial, I will be using the Barbarian character, but you're welcome to follow along with any other character you like. Import the character by dragging it into your project. We also want to go ahead and import our textures. Go into the textures folder and drag the texture.png into the textures folder. Then in Godot, right-click the character and make a new inherited scene. We're going to save this scene in the scenes folder. Now we're going to do a little bit of cleanup and make our future lives easier by setting up an external material. When we dragged in the character, you notice that it also created the duplicate of the material that's already included in our textures folder, and we want to clean this up. At the same time, it'll also be helpful if we create an external material. To do this, we're going to click on our Barbarian character, go to the import settings, scroll down all the way to the bottom where it says materials, and under the extract option we're going to select extract and overwrite. We're going to set our extraction path in our materials folder, and then we can re-import the character. Now that we have an external material, we're able to select it by going into our materials folder and double-clicking it. This gives us some options where we can, for example, change the color and change the textures. We can then also go ahead and delete the texture in our characters folder. When we delete the texture in our characters folder, Godot is going to yell at us and tell us that no, we cannot delete this because it is a dependency on the Barbarian material, but this is fine. We're just going to click remove, and then we're going to make sure that the material uses the Barbarian texture in our textures folder instead. We're going to remove the texture on the material and then just drag in the texture from our textures folder. I'm going to reset the color, and now we've set up our character to use an external resource with the texture that's in our textures folder. This is going to make our future lives a little bit easier. If we then inspect our character, we can notice that there are these weird lines on top of the character. This is called banding, and it's due to the compression of our texture. We don't really want this, so we're going to disable this by clicking into our textures import settings and then changing the compression mode to lossless. If we then re-import the texture, we notice that there are no more weird lines or banding, and the character is now ready for use. Now that we're done setting up the character, let's move on to the animations. Just like with the rest of the assets, we're going to make a folder structure to keep our work nice and organized. So let's go ahead and create a new folder called Animations. Within that folder, we're going to need a couple of subfolders. One is going to be called Source, which will hold all of the source files for our animations. And the other folder is going to be called rig_medium animations. And then let's bring in some of the animations. In the animations folder, you might find multiple subfolders, one for each type of rig. Because our barbarian is using a medium rig, we'll want to use the medium rig animations as well. The large rig animations will not be compatible. So in the rig medium folder, you'll find various different animation sets, and you can basically pick and choose which ones you need for your project. For this tutorial, we're going to be using the combat melee set, the general set, and the movement basic set. So let's go ahead and drag these into our animations source folder. To work with these animations, we're going to create an animation library. To use an animation library, we need to extract all of the animations from our animation sets. To do this, we're going to double-click on our animation set. That brings us into our advanced import settings. Here you will be greeted by Manny or Mannequin Character, and you can preview all of the animations. To extract the animations, you will want to click on the top left where it says Actions, go into Set Animation Save Paths, and then we're going to pick our Animation Rig Medium Animations folder, select this folder, and you will find all of the animations that can be extracted. Now each animation set will come with a T-pose included. This is useful for setting up things like attaching weapons and other things. For the first animation set you extract, you will want to include the T-pose, but you can disable it for any subsequent animation sets. We're going to click Set Paths, and then we're going to re-import our animation set, which will bring all of our animations into our Rig Medium Animations folder. Now we want to repeat this for all of the animation sets we're bringing in. We're going to double click, Actions, Set Animation Save Paths, select the Animations folder. Here we can disable the T-pose. Even if we forget to disable, it'll just overwrite and all of the T-pose animations are the same. But yeah, just for clarity, we can just disable the T-pose. Set paths and re-import. Now that we've extracted all of our animations, we can go ahead and create an animation library. To do this, we're going back to our barbarian scene and we're going to add a new animation player. In this animation player, you can click Animation, Manage Animation, and you can create your new library here. This animation library is going to hold all of our player animations, so we're going to call it Player. You can also organize these animation libraries by player type. So for instance, you could have an animation library for your barbarian and the knight class, or you can go and make an animation library per combat type. So you could have one for ranged animations, one for melee animations, or one for just the enemies. For now, we're going to just put our player animations in here. Adding the animations can be done by clicking this little folder icon here. We're going to navigate to the folder where we saved all of our animations. We're going to select all of them and click Open. This adds all of our animations into our library. And don't forget to save your library. Now that we've added all of the animations to our library, we can go ahead and preview all of the animations. We can go into our animation player and we can select any of these animations and play them. To make animations loop, we want to hit the loop button in the bottom right corner here. Alright, so let's recap. We've set up our character, we've set up an external material, we've imported our textures, we've imported all of our animations and extracted them into their own folder so that we can create an animation library. We've now set up our animation library, and we can use our animation player to display and preview all of the animations. Setting up a second character will be much faster because we've done a lot of prep work already. So to do this, we're going to import our character. Let's choose the night character and drag him into our characters folder. Create a new inherited scene and save this. Then go into our barbarian scene and copy and paste the animation player. With the animation player copied, our knight character now has access to the same animation library as our barbarian did, so we can preview and play all of the animations from here as well. If you want to use one of the large characters, you simply follow the same steps we did for importing a regular character. First, we drag our character file into our characters folder. Then you will want to extract its material, but because our large barbarian is using the same material as our regular barbarian, we can simply set its material to use an external one, and we're going to point that towards the one we made earlier. We're going to create a new inherited scene for our large barbarian, and we're going to save that. Then we'll need some animations for our large character. Drag those into our animations folder. Put them into the source. Double click to extract them to their own paths. I'm gonna make a new folder called Rig Large Animations. Select folder, set paths, and re-import. And then finally, we'll want to add a new animation player and create a new animation library. And add all of the animations to the library. And there we go. It's a pretty simple process. Just make sure you use the correct rig large animations, and setup should be exactly the same as before. In theory, this is all you need to go ahead and create your own player script and hook up logic and play animations by referencing the animation player. But we're going to go a couple of steps further and do some polishing and cleanup, and I'll show you some tips and tricks for using these characters. Let's go back into our barbarian scene and preview some more animations. Let's check out a one-handed attack chop. Well, this looks a little bit weird because he doesn't have any weapons. Let's change that. Let's go into our assets folder and check out which assets we've got to work with. For this tutorial, I only imported my one-handed axe and a shield for the barbarian. In an actual asset pack, you'll have more assets to work with. Most non-character GLTF assets are actually split into two file formats, a .gltf and a .bin version. If you want to import these assets, make sure that you import both the bin and the GLTF version. In this case, it's also easier if we also include the texture. So let's go ahead and drag all of these files into a new folder called Accessories. We want to make sure that the axe and the shield are using the material that we extracted from the barbarian earlier. Instead of extracting new materials from the axe and the shield, we're just going to tell Godot to use the external material. Double click the axe, go into the materials setting, and then hit the checkbox for using external materials. Then point the material towards the materials folder we used earlier and re-import the asset. Repeat this for the shield as well. Now that we've made sure that all three of these assets use the correct material, we can safely clean up this extra barbarian texture. Let's go ahead and attach these weapons to the character. First, let's put the barbarian into T-pose. The T-pose is the default position for the character, making it much easier to correctly align and attach the weapons. To attach the weapons to the character, we're going to need to create some bone attachment nodes. Click your skeleton node and add a new bone attachment 3D node. We're going to need 2 of these, so you can duplicate this, and then let's rename them left hand and right hand. These bone attachment 3D nodes will allow us to parent the weapons to specific bones in the character's rig. First, we need to line up the bone attachment 3D nodes with their corresponding nodes on the rig. Click the bone attachment 3D node and then go into the bone name tab, and you set the right hand to handslot.r, and you set the left hand to handslot.l. Now we can drag the axe into his right hand by parenting it to the right hand bone attachment node, and we can attach the shield to his left hand by parenting it to the left hand bone attachment node. Not all assets are oriented correctly by default. In some cases you may have to change this, but it's very easy. For the axe, it needs to face outwards, so when he chops, the blade part is hitting away from him. So we click the axe, now we go into its transform properties, and then we need to rotate it so it aligns with the outside. In our case, this is 180 degrees. For the shield, it needs to be on the back of his hand, so that when he holds it in front of him, it doesn't clip through his hand. So we need to move it up slightly. It might not be immediately obvious how a weapon should be held or how it should be attached. So you might have to preview some animations and adjust from there. Alright, let's go ahead and preview some animations. So let's check out that attack chop animation from before. That's chopping alright. Let's check out a jump chop. Looks correct to me. And finally, let's see that shield in action. Here is a blocking animation. Let's try giving this barbarian a gun. In my assets folder, I've got a shotgun from the engineer that's ready to import. Let's click all of the files and drag them to our accessories folder. Put the character back into its T-pose, and then we can drag the shotgun into his right hand. Now, to see which way this character should hold the gun, we should preview some ranged animations. If we look into our animation library, we notice that there are no ranged animations here yet, so we need to import them. We're going to repeat the steps from earlier. Go into the animations folder, pick out the animation set you want to use. We're going with combat ranged. Drag that into our animations source folder. Double click the animation set. Go to actions, set animation save paths. Go to our medium animations folder and re-import our animation set. If we then go into our animation library, we can simply add all of the ranged animations into our animation set. So that if down the line you want to add more animation sets to your library, you can simply just add them as you please. So now that we've got some ranged animations, let's see what that looks like. Let's try a two-hand ranged aiming animation. Now we can see that the gun should be pointing forwards. Let's go back into the T-pose and let's change the rotation on the Y-axis. And in this case, it looks to be 90 degrees. Let's preview our animation to confirm. Let's try a two-handed shooting animation. Let's quickly hide the shield and the axe and play our shooting animation. That looks correct to me. Let's try a reload. and the aiming again. This looks fine to me. Some of my character packs come with alternative textures. Let's try setting up one of those. Let's go into our night scene. Let's put him into an idle animation. And let's just let that play for a second. Then let's go to our textures folder. And if we go into our asset pack, we'll find in the textures folder there are extra textures. Let's go ahead and import all of the alternative night textures. Drag those into the textures folder. Now to apply one of the alternative textures, we need to find the night's material. This is the night's material, and if we try to change our texture right now, by dragging this in, nothing happens, because this material is a read-only version. This is the internal version of the material. For the night, we never extracted the material or used an external material, so let's do that first. So we go back to our night character, go into the import settings, and let's extract the material. We're going to extract and overwrite. Going into our assets folder, materials, select folder, and re-import. If we now go into our materials folder, we find a night texture. This night texture is unlocked because it's an external material. If we now go into the albedo settings, we can remove the texture and we can drag in any other texture we like. Because we were already using an external material for the barbarian, all we have to do to get the alternative textures working on him is simply import the textures, go into our barbarian scene, click the barbarian material, and drag in an alternative texture. Let's go back to our knight character for a second. He's got his nice shiny red armor, but let's say we don't want all of the pieces to be red. Let's change back to the default for a second. If we want only his helmet to be red, we should make a new material. We simply duplicate the knight material. Let's call this knight Alt-C. Let's go into the Alt-C material and apply the Alt-C texture. And then now we can simply drag and drop onto the pieces we want to color. So this way we can give him just a red helmet. I think the barbarian is getting a little bit jealous of our knight's shiny armor, so let's see what he looks like in this. Because all of the pieces of the character are modular, we can simply select the body, the legs, and the arms, copy them, and paste them into our barbarian character. We should then hide or delete the existing pieces. Now we can see that our barbarian is wearing our knight's armor. Let's see him running around in this. Let's also disable the gun, give him back his axe and his shield. Nice. Now we've got an animated character set up using body parts from two separate characters. And if you're looking for more characters and accessories, you can check out my Patreon, where I release a new mystery character asset each month. Patreon is a great way to support me to make more game assets and content, and you get some fun characters like these in return. Thanks for the consideration. Back to the tutorial. Each texture is made specific for a character. However, you can go and add an experiment by putting different textures into different materials. So for example, if we put the knight's texture into the barbarian's material, you can get some different results. Not all of these will work, but some of them might give you some fun options to work with. Let's go ahead and reset this barbarian to normal. I'm going to replace the texture, and I'm going to delete the knight's pieces, as well as the gun, and then re-enable the body parts. Let me give you another example of where using external materials can be useful. If we go back into the knight character and just restore him back to normal for the moment, let's say we want to give his armor a nice glossy and metallic look. If we go into the material, we have some options to play with. We can increase the metallic and we can decrease the roughness. However, if we do this, we notice that his face also got metallic, which is what we don't want. Let's reset this back to normal. To fix this, we're going to make a duplicate of the material and we're going to call this Knight Metallic. Then, just for the moment, we're going to change the color of the metallic texture to something obvious like green. So now when we drag our metallic texture onto our metallic parts, we can immediately see which parts got affected. Now I want to apply this to everything except for the face and the cloak, because those need to be not metallic. We can then reset the color again and go into our metallic and roughness settings. There we go, nice and shiny. If you've imported a character with a cape or a cloak, and you noticed that only one of the cloak's sides is visible, you'll need to go into your material settings, and under the transparency tab, you'll want to set the Cull mode from back to disabled. This allows both inside and outside faces of the meshes to be rendered. You might not want to disable culling on your entire character, so let's apply it to just the cloak. I'm going to reset the Cull mode back to normal, duplicate the knight's material, call this knight double-sided, set the double-sided materials Cull mode to disabled, and then apply the new material to just the cloak. This way you'll make sure that only the cloak's faces are rendered inside and out, but the character is still using backface culling. Alright, that's enough messing about with the characters for now. Let's actually go back to some animations. Let's go back into our barbarian scene, and we're going to set up a state machine. This state machine will be responsible for handling the different states of our character. It'll be responsible for selecting animations to play and also how to transition between them, which is a pretty useful thing to have. To get started, we add a new node to our barbarian scene. We're going to add the animation tree node. In this animation tree node, we will want to create a new animation node blend tree, and we want to assign the animation player of our barbarian. In our animation tree, we now want to create a new state machine and hook that up to our output of our animation tree. We can now open up our state machine and see what we're working with. We can see a start node and an end node, and these nodes are basically responsible for which states your character will be in. The first state we're adding will be an idle state. We're going to right click, add animation, and go select idle A. If we then select our idle state, we can see that the character goes into idle. At an earlier step, we changed our idle animation to loop, but just in case you didn't, select your idle animation and then click this looping button to set it to loop. Now, each time the character gets loaded into a scene, we want the character to automatically default to this idle state. We're also actually going to rename the state to idle. We then want to make sure that we transition from the start to the idle state. We do this by clicking this Connect Node tool. We're just going to drag a line from start to idle. Now, when we load our character into a scene, it will always immediately default to the idle state. And this will go and loop on forever. At some point, we'll want the character to move. We're going to create a new state that's called Move. For this, we will use the walking bee animation. We're going to rename this Move. If we select the Move state, the character now moves. Go back into your animation player, go to the walking bee animation and set this to loop. So now we have a character that is in its move state. We want the character to be able to go from the idle state to the move state. Now we have to click this manually, and if we do, we see that the idle animation just gets played on top of the move animation with no transition or anything in between. So we'll need to change this. We'll want the animation to be able to transition from idle to move. We're going to draw a line between idle and move. However, we don't want this to happen automatically, but we want to control this by code at some point. We're going to click in the transition, and where it says advance, we do not want it to advance automatically. We just want to enable its advance. So now we can go from idle to move. We'll also want to be able to move back to idle again. So we're going to drag a line from move to idle. And here as well, if we keep this on automatic advance, every time we go from idle to move, it will automatically move back, which is not what we want. So if we set this to enable, we can go from idle to move and back. Going from the idle to the move state is a very sudden transition, and this does not look or feel nice in-game. So to fix this, we can add some transition time. If we click on our transition line, we can then go into our transition inspector properties, and we can add a fade time. If we add a fade time of 1 second, it will take the character 1 second to go from idle to move. So if we click the move state, the character slowly starts walking before going into its full walk cycle. A transition time of 1 second is pretty long. If the player starts moving, you want it to move into its move state pretty quickly, but it should still be smooth. We're going to lower the fade time to something much lower, like a 0.2. And we'll also want to make sure that the return from move to idle also has a fade time. I'm going to set this to 0.1 seconds. So now if we go from move to idle, it comes to a sudden stop, but it's not as janky as it was before. And if we go back from idle to move, the character starts moving smoothly. This is a very basic example of a state machine. In reality, and in your projects, you will have much more states to have to transition between. So in this example, I've prepared a more advanced state machine. These are just movement-related states. So we have an idle, a move, a sprint, a jump, and a falling state. Now these state machines can become pretty complicated pretty quickly because pretty much all of the states have to interact with one another. I would recommend looking up a separate tutorial on state machines to get a better understanding of how to set this up. So we have all of these different states, and the character can transition from idle to sprint, from sprint to jump, etc. If you notice, there is no direct line between idle and sprint, because usually you would start moving and then sprinting. So if we go from idle to sprint, you can see the little line tracing up until sprint. So at this point, you would set up your player script and your character controller, and then hook in your state machine. Now, I'm not a programmer, so I'm not really qualified to teach you any programming. I've gone ahead and set up my own player script behind the scenes, and let's take a look at how this looks like in-game. Alright, so I've prepared a little demo scene with our barbarian character and a simple environment. I've set up a couple of states. We can walk, we can jump, and we can sprint. The way I've set this up is that if the character's ground speed is exactly 0, he will default to the idle state. And if the character starts moving and his velocity is between 0 and 8, he will go into the moving state. And then if the character's velocity exceeds 8, he will go into a sprinting state. By holding shift, you sprint in my case. Now, if we move around a little, we can notice that it looks like the character is just sliding when he's walking. This is because this walking animation isn't necessarily synced up to the speed of the player's movement. If we go back into our character's state machine and click the moving state. On this right side here, we have some options, particularly timeline length and stretch timescale, which we will want to have turned on. This basically means that this animation, the walking bee animation that we're playing, will take exactly 1 second. If I change this to 2 seconds, it will take 2 seconds for the animation to play, so it will look much slower. To speed up the animation, we want to put this at 0.5, and let's see what that looks like in-game. Once in-game and we start moving around, we can see that the movement of the animation lines up with the player's movement speed much better, although him moving this fast with his little legs looks a little weird, so let's see if we can change that. Back in the state machine, we're actually going to change the animation that we play on our move state. Instead of walking bee, we're going to change this to running bee. And we're going to change the timeline length back to 1 second. And let's have a look at what that does. So now, when we run around in our game, we can see that the animation speed matches the character's movement speed much better. However, we now have a different problem. If we go into our sprinting state, the animation speed doesn't match, because the animation for the sprint and the animation for the walk is the same animation. So in our sprinting state, we're also using the same running bee animation, and we actually don't want to change this animation, but we just want to adjust the speed. So I'm going to change this from 1 second to 0.5 seconds to see what this looks like in game. Now, when we move around, in our move state, we're playing the running bee animation at 1.0 seconds. But if we go into our sprint state, we're playing the same animation, but at 0.5 seconds, which gives us a much smoother transition and just looks more natural overall. I'm going to do my best to create as many different animations as I possibly can for these. But sooner or later, you're going to need an animation that I haven't made yet. In that case, you will need to know how to set up my characters for use with external or third-party animations. For this example, we're going to use Mixamo. For this example, I'm going to download this climbing up wall animation. We're going to download it as FBX without skin. Then we're going to drag in our climbing up wall animation and import it into our animations folder. Now we need to set up our character for retargeting. To do this, we're going to duplicate our barbarian file, call this barbarian bone mapped, and we are duplicating the original GLTF file, not the scene. We're going to double click on the barbarian bone mapped to go into its import settings. Click the skeleton 3D node and go into the retargeting section. Here we need to create a new bone map. This new bone map should use the skeleton profile humanoid setting. Now we can see all of the bones on our character, and we might need to make some adjustments. In this case, our character's rig doesn't have any shoulders, so the shoulders are not mapped. That means that we have to manually map the left upper arm, the left lower arm, and the right side of the body. So match the left upper arm with upper arm .l, the lower arm with lower arm.l, the right upper arm with upper arm.r, and the same for the right lower arm. That will be lower arm.r. Alright, with this set up, we can now re-import our character. Now that we've retargeted our barbarian's rig to use a general humanoid skeleton, we should do the same for our Mixamo animation. Double-click the animation, go into the skeleton node, and then under bone map, create a new bone map. This bone map should also use the humanoid profile, and in this case, we do not need to make any manual adjustments, so we can just go ahead and re-import the rig as it is. Now we also still need to extract our climbing up wall animation, so double click this again. Go into Actions, Set Animation Save Paths. We're going to make a new folder in our animations that we're going to call Mixamo. Select current folder, set paths, and re-import. Now we can create a new inherited scene of our bone-mapped barbarian. And let's save that in our scenes folder and add an animation player. In this animation player, we're going to make a new library. We're going to call this Mixamo and add our Mixamo animation. And there we go. We've got our barbarian set up to use an external animation. Because my characters have very cartoony proportions and Mixamo humanoid animations don't, some of these animations may look a little funky. In Mixamo, you can change the character's arm space, which will decrease or increase the distance between the shoulders. This can help improve the look of the animation. Now, if we want to try and add more animations to our animation library, for example, let's do the running bee animation, we will get a bunch of errors. These errors are telling us that the running bee rig does not match the rig of the bone-mapped barbarian, which is true because we've retargeted the original skeleton to a new skeleton, the humanoid profile skeleton. To fix this, we need to retarget our existing animation set as well. So let's do that. To speed things up, we're going to go back into our barbarian bone mapped and we're going to save its bone map. Go into the skeleton settings, and then go to bone map and then save as. And we're going to save this bone map as KayKit humanoid. And then we're going to re-import the barbarian. Now we can duplicate our movement basic animation set, also call this bone mapped, and double click, go into the skeleton 3D, and now we are going to load the bone map we just saved. We can now re-import the character, and if we now try to add the running animation into our library again, we will no longer get any errors and we are able to play the animation. And there we go, we have a running animation playing on our general skeleton. Keep in mind that because the animations aren't made for this retargeted skeleton, they might look a little different than the original ones. Here's a bonus tip. Using the Mannequin Character. The animations come bundled with the character, so that if you want to preview your animation, you'll have a character to preview them on. This character comes in both medium and large variations. Because this character comes bundled in our animations, we can also use it in our project. If we go into the character animations source files, and let's double click the general tab, we can see the character is already here. We just have to extract it. To do this, we're going to duplicate our animation file and call it Mannequin Medium, and drag this into our characters folder. Then open the advanced import settings by double clicking the character file, and in the import menu, scroll down to animation and unselect import animation. If we then re-import the character, we'll just have the character without any animations. And then we can create a new inherited scene and add our animation player. Let's copy the one from the barbarian. And we can actually copy the animation tree as well. And then simply save this in our scenes folder, and you've got another character to work with. Although he is looking a little bit bland without his texture. So let's go ahead and add that. We're going to create a new material in our materials folder. Right click and create new resource. The material we're looking for is a standard material 3D. Go ahead and create that. Let's just call this mannequin. Now we have to make sure that our character will actually use this material, so we're going to go back into its import settings, and under materials we're going to point the material to the external one that we just created. And re-import. Now we can see the character is using the external material. In the animations package, you'll find a texture for our mannequin character. Let's drag that into our textures folder. Go back into our material, and into the albedo slot, just drag the texture. And there we go, we got a fully colored mannequin. This works for both the medium and the large animation set. So to create a mannequin character, we duplicate the animation set, call this one mannequin large, drag it into our characters folder, double click, unselect import animations, create a new inherited scene, make sure our character uses the external material, and copy our animation player and animation tree. And let's drag them into our scene to see what they look like. I'm just going to go ahead into their material and turn down the roughness to 0.2, so they are nice and shiny. And there we go, now we have another 2 characters to play around with. That was about everything I can teach you on using KayKit characters in Godot. You now know everything you need to implement these in your own projects. If you learned anything new, hit the like button. If you end up using any of my characters in your projects, feel free to tag me on socials, I'd love to see them. And if you like my work, you can check out my website for more assets. Check out my Patreon if you want to support me. Keep up to date with what I'm working on my socials or joining my Discord. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching, good luck with all of your projects.